Welcome to the Stormduck podcast. We have transformed again. This is gonna take us ages to record, so we finally managed to come together and discuss the longest book on this podcast. Joining me today is Paolo, the Shard Bearer.
I wanted to put a Simpson reference, which is the longest book until now.
That's true. And also Stormfather himself, Martin. He's the reason we're here. He's at fault.
I am Telenel, bearer of agonies, herald of a new age.
Oh my god.
An age where my deck books finally covers the most epic fantasy since the Lord of the Rings. Beware, humanity. There is no turning back from the way of kings.
Oh my god.
Also, hi, I'm Martin. I'm excited to be here.
Also, it's a year since we started with this podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's an anniversary.
This was also the same lineup for the first episode.
Yes, that's what I want to say, exactly. So welcome back, Martin. You've made it the whole year. It's a full circle.
Also, I'm the first guest of the new year. That's cool. So actually, you have never missed an episode? You've made an episode every 2 weeks?
Yes.
That's awesome, actually.
So this book we've been reading, Turbo Speeds in Paolo's case. Martin has reread this like the first time?
Second, just.
Second, okay.
First in Czech, second in English, yeah.
And I've been reading this at a snail pace. I've been so tired because I changed my job and I've been crushed. And I've been reading, like, been force-feeding this book in my throat every day. Like, so difficult to read this book. It was so long.
Philip actually converted to Vorinism in order to finish this book, which is cool.
So it was the best thing and the worst thing. I have so much to say about this book. I'm sure you have more to say about this book. So, of course, we're talking about The Way of Kings. Not The Way of the Kings. Yeah, excuse me very much.
Yeah, Philip, that was nice. Nice of you.
Which is the first part of the Stormlight Archive series by Brandon Sanderson, called Brando Sando, I've learned. Is that what people actually call him?
I'm not sure. I just heard it somewhere and kind of adopted it. Sounds cool. Rhymes.
It does sound cool.
Does it?
I think so.
Okay.
So I've read just the first book. You are experts. You guys have already read like most of this shit. I can't deal. So it might not surprise you that we are planning big things with this Stormduck series of episodes about this book. In the first episode you're listening to today, we'd like to only discuss the writer a little bit and also just general impressions. How did we get into reading this book? How was it in general? And hopefully give you an idea whether you want to read it or not without any spoilers at all. And then the next episode is going to be something new we thought we could try. And that is the concepts and the world building. So explain the things that are core concepts and say what we think about them. And then finally, the next part, which will be from 1 episode to 77 episodes, will be just going over the actual story, full on spoilers, and discussing its chronological order, I guess. I'm sure there's going to be so much to say. So when we get tired of this and die, we'll end this series of Stormduck episodes.
I cannot wait.
Ideally, it will be about 40 minutes per episode every week, which is not going to happen, I'm sure.
I mean, it's a nice pipe dream.
Yeah. So as usual, let's start a little bit about Brandon Sanderson. He's becoming increasingly popular recently. I feel like he's gonna be the biggest deal if he keeps this up with this kind of popularity with these books.
Well, I think it will depend if and when they'll make a movie adaptation or a TV adaptation of some of his work.
Yeah, those are actually in the works.
Yeah, exactly.
I heard, but it might end up being like a very cheap thing that doesn't really go anywhere. Or it might end up being like a super big thing like Game of Thrones. So we'll see.
I've heard about Brandon saying at one convention that they have really big budget for the series and movies. So I think in terms of the effects and the world building and the actors, I don't think they'll have a problem. But it's still like adapting something that's written on thousands and thousands of pages.
Can I say something though?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
This is something that I will say so many times in these episodes. Good moment to introduce this point.
Okay.
This should never become a movie. Not because I don't think that they can make a good movie or like a good TV series out of it, but because this is clearly an anime. Like this should be an anime.
It actually,
it would be so perfect if they made first a manga adaptation and then an anime adaptation, or just the anime adaptation, but it would be so much better than anything else.
With the kind of concepts and world building and storytelling that it has, I can see that actually, yes.
Well, when we talk about spoilers, there are a few scenes where I was just like,
Top 10 anime moments.
yeah, exactly.
So they bought the rights to this whole Cosmere universe.
What the fuck? What did you just say? What did you just excuse me?
What is it?
Is it about Cosmere?
Cosmere?
Cosmere, yes.
Cosmere, okay. So I'm gonna say some random things I found. I dug up about Brandon Sanderson. I'm sure Martin knows much more, so please interrupt and tell me the truth about him.
The grand truth.
Yeah.
No, I actually don't know that much about him, but please continue.
So he was brought up Christian, and he was a volunteer missionary in South Korea. Did you know?
No, not at all.
It was interesting.
Okay.
It didn't really influence his life that much, but I was very surprised that was the case.
Yeah.
He used to work as a night auditor at a hotel, so that gave him time to write.
Oh, yes.
And when he started writing, he would write so much and nobody would be interested at all. So he wrote 12 novels at first and nobody wanted to publish anything. And he was trying to really force his way into the business and failing very much until one of the novels was finally picked up by a publisher.
I think it was the Elantris?
I think so, yeah. And then the book after that became much more popular and it escalated exponentially and he became really, really popular. He's written so many books. He's only 46 years old now. He's got 3 children and he's writing like a machine. Martin sent us a video where he was writing a book and finished the book even during an interview. I like the joke.
Well, it's actually funny to see how his multitasking works, because every time he's doing a Q&A or a podcast or anything, if there's a video, you will see him signing like non-stop. So he's doing that non-stop anytime he is somewhere publicly doing anything else.
Okay, I'll also share something, because one morning I got the suggested video on YouTube because I'd been looking up some stuff about Brandon Sanderson, and the video was like, "I'm sorry I lied to you," something like that. So I was like, what is this?
Yes.
And essentially it was a video where he was admitting that during the pandemic, he couldn't go to like conventions, he couldn't travel, he had much more free time, and so he wrote 5 novels.
Oh my god.
Yes.
Just in the free time while writing the other novels. So I was so impressed that because of that I bought the box of the first trilogy of Mistborn.
Awesome.
Everybody is loving this so hard. Like I can't deal. Like all these books are so highly rated. I've never heard anything negative about any of this. Like everybody loves this so much.
Yeah, well, something I wanted to say is it's a very famous interview to George R.R. Martin, where he says that in his mind there are 2 types of writers. One is the gardener and the other one is the architect. And in his mind, like, the gardener is the writer who, like, he starts writing, and Martin himself is that type. Is the type of writer where they have a general idea of what they want to do, but they don't really plan it out, and then they start writing, and as they write they start giving it a shape until they achieve what like the best of what they can do with the base material. And on the other hand, there is the architect writer who from the beginning plans everything out and then is essentially just filling the blank. And Brandon Sanderson is
that makes sense.
clearly the second type. It's so clear that he has a clear plan of everything he wants to say, everything, how he wants to structure each book. It's nice to see someone being able to plan things out so well.
Yeah, I think it says everything that he has his own personal Wikipedia that he's keeping. Every time there's like a difficult question from the fans, like, let me consult the wiki, and he's just like searching through the Wikipedia, his own personal Wikipedia. The architect for sure.
So speaking of the planning and this Cosmere universe, I found article about it, and I was reading like what is it and what's the intention behind it, and it really made me laugh because it says that there are these universes: Elantris, Mistborn, Warbreaker, Stormlight Archive, White Sand, blah blah blah. And all of these are set in the Cosmere collection. And the idea is that he has a desire to create an epic length series without requiring readers to buy a ridiculous number of books. Excuse me? Lol.
Yeah, that kind of that sentence didn't make sense to me either. It's like, wait, how?
Well, I guess the point is that in theory, like for example, for Mistborn, I haven't read it yet, but from what I could understand, you can read the first trilogy and only the first trilogy and nothing else about Mistborn and nothing else about the Cosmere, and it's still like a complete story.
That's true.
Yeah, it's very funny wording on this.
I guess like the Stormlight Archive is kind of the exception because it will be 10 books plus all of the extra stuff.
That's true.
One little detail we didn't mention, just to finish the part about Brandon Sanderson, is that he also wrote the ending of the
Wheel of Time.
Yes, the Wheel of Time series of books. So after the writer died, Mr. Robert Jordan, so his wife, I think, or somebody from his family asked Brandon Sanderson to finish the series.
Directly to,
so he wrote the last.
To Robert Jordan.
I think they were friends at some point, and they Jordan wrote a lot of notes on how he wants to like finish the series cancer, and how he wants to.
So he knew he would not be able to finish the series.
Yes. So it was kind of given that he's not gonna finish the books, so he just gave the mantle to Brandon.
Yeah. So unless you have something else to say about Brandon, let's move on to the book itself.
I would maybe add that there are still a lot of books that aren't connected to the Cosmere. Like, there are still books like the Rhythmatis, which we talked about in the previous episode.
Yeah.
There's the Reckoners, which is kind of interesting. That's like a series, more young adult novels, which are about post-apocalyptic world with superheroes in it. So, like, completely different concept than anything he writes, I think. And then we have Skyward, which is also not connected to the Cosmere, which is more like a sci-fi from first-person perspective of a female character, which is also something that he doesn't do normally, but I think he handled it very well in those books. And then there's like books that I kind of at one point want to read, but it just sounds so silly because that's Alcatraz series, where it's just like the books are always like Alcatraz versus the and something, and the first book is like Alcatraz versus the evil librarians, and it's essentially like a young adult story which is very silly. Like it's more silly than anything else he written so far, I think, and it's silly in a way that the main characters have superpowers, and I'm like doing air quotes here because they have like these talents, they call them, and each person of the family has like a different special talent, but their talents let's say it's hard to imagine a situation where the talent would be beneficial for your needs. For example, like the main character has a talent that he breaks things that other people value the most, and that's his talent. Or his grandpa has a talent that he always comes late. And like it's a superpower because you can actually use it in good ways. Like you can come late to the bullet that was shot on you, so it misses you, or something like that.
Sounds like a really fun children's book or something.
It's more it's more aimed to like young adults, maybe like even younger, and it's like just like fun, I think, for him to write these. And I want to explore those. Sounds really fun, but not didn't have. They
also
time
sound
yet.
like they're not gonna be 1,000 pages long.
Is that
I'm not sure about that. I don't know. I haven't checked.
Every time Martin talks about him, it seems so enjoyable. It's like talking about a treat.
I understand. Like, to be honest, one of the things that really got me interested in the first place with the books, like, I love the concept of having such a vast universe which is interconnected, but at the same time, like, you can consume it one small piece at a time. In most cases, right? So you have these really cool universes which are only single focused, like Dune. Like, Dune is only Dune. There's nothing else. Or if they are interconnected, then it usually ends up becoming a big mess, or the connections are just irrelevant. Like, for example, DC Comics and Marvel Comics, as much as I like certain stories, I just hate the way their universes are constructed because it's such a big mess.
Brandon has a system, and he has like underlying knowledge, which is kind of the architectural way. He starts from ground bottom, how physics works, how the different kind of planes of the universe works, how the planets are kind of interconnected between each other. So he's essentially building the universe from ground up. And he's not sharing a lot of that information with us. But the point is, by having this ground level knowledge that is essentially the core of the universe, I think he can build all the concepts off of it and not get lost. Thanks to that, by reading any kind of material from the Cosmere, you can rely that the physics or the ground rules that are applying in the universe are going to work in that universe as well. And that's the appeal, I think.
So, The Way of the Kings was published... No, The Way of Kings.
I was about to correct
you. Yes, thank you.
Oh my fucking god. This book was published in 2010, and it's 1,000+ pages. And my question is, what kind of mindset did you get into this book? Because I was super hyped for it. I was really excited to read this.
Actually, Adam recommended it to me. He was the first to read The Way of Kings. And my level of hype was intermediate, I would say, because it was... I had this hunger for some epic fantasy book at that time, so I kind of like went into it with medium expectations, and my expectations got blown up by that.
So I started reading it, and at the beginning I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is interesting. I was intrigued, but very confused. But from the start, the concept of the prologue and how it's so impactful, like it was something that really hooked me in.
So it surpassed your expectations?
Not really surpassed my expectations, just that because I went into this without any real expectation. Like, I was just like, okay, let's see how this is. And how can I put it? You know, before we were talking about how I like these really vast universes, and that kind of prologue gave me like a peek at that kind of like universe and how vast of a story this is. That was really cool.
In my case, I like I said, I was overhyped and I did everything wrong about reading this book. I think it's not fair for me to have complaints about it.
Please do have complaints. Like we
I have
kind of
so many complaints, and at the same time, I really liked it. So I don't want to like hate on it, but at the same time, there are many things that are very problematic for me personally, and they all might be just because of the time and how I was reading it. Because, like I said, I was tired. I was just like trying to catch up because all these bastards on this podcast have already read 5 of these books, and I've just started the first one. I couldn't catch up and went to record this episode. I couldn't stop talking about it. And I went into it, and I was like, of course it's gonna be a prologue that doesn't mean anything because it's like a giant ass book and I don't know what's happening, so okay. And then all these lashings I talked about, so I was like, yeah, this is like a video game, amazing. And then there was like some fights with the army at the beginning, and I was like, I didn't know this is gonna be 300 Spartans, let's go. And then and then I was like super hyped. Like the first part of the book I was like, amazing, this is what I wanted, let's go. And then I was like, ain't nobody got time for that. This book is taking its sweet time. Oh my fucking god, just do something. And I was like, just do something.
So you got like overhyped by the hooks at the beginning, and then it just
and then I got like I got so exhausted with this. Like there are 3 kind of stories that Martin's gonna read us about, an essay that we're building up to. and some of them were great, and some of them I was like it felt like so dragged out. Some parts of it, and also there was a part I can't say because of spoilers that was kind of like repeated. There's like a beat in the story that was like again and again and again and again, and within the story were flashbacks to like a previous point of life of other characters, and in the flashbacks were flashbacks to another flashbacks in a fucking flashback, and I was like, there is the main story and then there is the flashback story, and I thought it was a flashback story, like a story bit, but no, it was like, okay, the flashback is going along with the main story, and then we already passed like a bunch of years in the flashback while the other story moved on, and then in the flashback there was a flashback in before the flashback, and I was like, fucking just so I felt. I was just like, get on with it. Just what are you doing? And some of the elements, especially with the, let's say, the High Lord, the High Princess. So that part was interchangeably amazing and horribly boring. Like, some parts, I was like, why is this here? Like, this book is 1,000 pages. Just like, whoa. And then I got into like a slump, and I felt like an old man, and I was like, do you know how in television shows they assume you're dumb and they give you like hints of what you should be remembering, like remember this is the character that did that, and then they give you the character like there's like a blink or something, and you remember because you're dumb and you're watching television, you're brainwashed and you're zombie. And I was like, page 700, and then something this guy I read about like 700 pages ago, and I was like, who the fuck? Tell me who this is. So I was like looking in the book, and I was like, where was this? What is this? And then I got so stuck at one point I had to look up in the wiki, and I was like rereading like the summaries of the chapters, and I found what I had to find, and it took me like 30 minutes to find what they referenced here. And I was like, fuck, am I so dumb? So that's my experience. But then there were parts that I really loved, like it was really good. So if it was half the length, I would have probably loved it a lot. I think it was so long. Like, personally, there were so many unnecessary stretched out parts.
So for some of those things, I would not disagree with you. It is true that some things are stretched. I think they pay off in the same book, or especially some of them will pay off in the... Yeah,
that's what I was expecting you to say.
Like, there is a point to be made that's not a justification, because, you know, you're reading a book, especially when it's the first book, you can expect that some things will pay off later, but it doesn't mean they should be boring in this book just for the sake of being more interesting later. So I don't disagree with you. I was going through my notes again, and my first half notes, I was much more critical than how I was in the second half. Because I think in the first half, as you said, there were some parts which were kind of dragged out. There were some parts which were really forced in just to explore the lore and just to explain certain things about the world. So many times characters would have conversations which were incredibly forced. Like there was part, like this clear, like I still remember this clear dialogue where there is a character who says, "Oh, do you know about this really important historical fact?" And the other guy says, "Yes, of course, it's really important." And the other guy says, "Well, let me explain it anyway."
I remember
like, what,
this.
What is this?
Yes, I guess that happens in some stages. It's kind of like parallel to animes as well. Like anime does this as well, right? It's like, like who's this? Oh, this is the most amazing person in this like village, and we know him because he's like legendary hero and such. So.
I don't disagree
I can see that.
Any of your criticism. The way some of the lore is introduced is a little clumsy, and as you said, some of the parts were kind of like repetitive or felt a little pointless. But I think it pays off within the same book, and it pays off in the sense just that really pounds into you that this is book one. And so it gets you interested in reading book two.
It's another one of my criticisms, actually. This book is a perfect trap I think all you people have Stockholm syndrome, and you manipulate it into being sucked into this world. And moreover, you all love history. So I feel like this book is a disguised history lesson. It's like,
yeah, that's true.
And I can't deal. I hate history lessons. I never liked history, and I can't listen to history and be comfortable. And this is like, I fell into a trap and I feel very abused and I feel betrayed because I wanted action, I wanted blood, I wanted magic, I wanted them lashings up those ceilings and all this shit, and it was amazing. And then they gave me a history lesson and I almost died, and now I'm all stuck into this and I'm gonna have to read all this shit. So I feel because the first book finished. And it's like Paolo said, it's a perfect introduction, and you cannot do anything else than read the next stuff.
Yes.
And I want to read the next book. And
it gives you many more questions.
This book was a definition of the like answers. It gets good after 18 hours or something. Like you watch these like animes, and they're like, oh, just keep going because after 7
I don't like that about this. Like. I feel like this is why Stormlight Archive is different, because Stormlight Archive actually gets you interested in the beginning.
So,
like it doesn't.
I don't want to get too much into spoilers. I don't want to get into spoilers at all. But I disagree with you in the sense that for that kind of shows that you're talking about, it either means that the first like episodes or whatever, they suck, or just that they're just build up, which is not enjoyable at all. I wouldn't say that in this book the build up wasn't enjoyable at all. I think a lot of it was really enjoyable. As you said, there were some parts where like they felt stretched out and pointless. On that I completely agree. But it like it never felt not enjoyable to me. It just felt like, okay, maybe this chapter is not the best. Let's go to another character. Maybe it will be more interesting.
Yeah, so that's another like a huge problem with me. That let's go to another character. I talked to Martin while I was reading this, and I asked, so how many of these characters are going to be relevant? Like there are so many characters introduced every single chapter, and I was like, how many of these characters? I wonder how many of these characters are gonna be relevant. And Martin was like, I don't know, maybe like 10%. I was like, fuck.
Well, there's a lot of names, there's a lot of name drops, and many of those names are kind of irrelevant, but I think most of the characters that you spend more than one chapter with are important in the story.
One of the things that I'm really appreciating as the story progresses is that it's true that in the first book, like, he drops a ton of names. When I was talking to you, I told you, like, yeah, you can forget many of these names. But I don't think that it's because they're not relevant or important. I think he's doing a fantastic job at giving everyone their time to shine, even those minor characters. Every time, he does a very good job at making you remember he introduced this character before, so that this character doesn't just appear out of nowhere, so that you never feel like the character is just there all of a sudden. But at the same time, because I think he understands that it's really hard to keep up with all of these names and all of these roles, when the character is about to become important, it usually becomes important slowly. Like, let's say it will be important in page 500 of the second book. It will start being mentioned more and more around page 300. Which is why I told you, like, I think it's not a problem if you completely forget most names in book one other than the main characters. Like, it's fine, because like in the back of your mind those names have appeared, and when it will start mentioning those names again, it will be like, maybe this guy appeared, I have vague memories about this character. And then when the character is relevant, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this character was always here, even though like I wasn't really paying attention to him because at that time it was not important, which I think is really well made. I understand, like, the name dropping is kind of overwhelming at times.
It wasn't really just the name dropping, but it was more like a feeling that I'm getting drowned into all this lore and details and like all these names, and at the same time I'm getting dried out and I'm super thirsty for more of it. There was never enough of it, and there was always too much of it.
You should cultivate.
Like, but I hate it.
Yes.
Cultivate. That's a nice
Maybe I was in the wrong
word you
mindset
used for that.
I just want to say I was so bogged down with details I want to know more about, and there are too many of them. And then at some point I was just like, I guess I'll just let it go. And then I was like enjoying it so much less because I stopped being curious about it. Be it the characters, be it the world building, be it the items, be it the magic, be it the creatures, be it the this or that. There's so many of them, and all of them were mentioned so briefly in this sea of stuff that I was just like, why do I even care? Like, I can't remember any of this anyway. And I was so frustrated. Which of them are important? God knows. I guess all of them.
I understand you.
I would say
it can be overwhelming.
No,
at
you're
points,
completely correct. But I will say that in this, I think space, like in your mind you were in while reading this book, really damaged your perspective on this. Because, I mean, maybe it would have been overwhelming regardless, even in more positive times, but at the same time I think you could have appreciated much more, like you could have focused much more on the positives than on the negatives, and you could have seen it much more as a challenge in a good way rather than just as a pressure, like you feel like you're studying.
I said this was all my fault. I read this in definitely the wrong way, but it doesn't change the fact that it was like so much. It was like a huge... I think this is the biggest book I've ever read in my life. I don't think I've ever read something so big. Because I was always daunted by it. I was always scared of this exact thing. So maybe I was also like building this narrative in my mind. To give it some praise and some positive stuff, I really, really like how grounded and modern it felt. It's definitely well written. And I was never feeling like there were predictable parts. And I felt like the characters didn't behave in stupid ways that didn't feel real. Like, that's what I really liked about this book. I felt like all of it was kind of grounded in rational decision-making or appropriate for the character and the situation. The characters were well painted out.
Okay. I would disagree only... I would actually disagree. That was like my main criticism of the first book. Well, my second main criticism. The first one is just like the dumb exposition. Well, not dumb, just... exposition which was out of place.
Inevitable question: how does it compare with the Broken Earth trilogy? Martin hasn't read that, but no spoilers.
I wanted to talk about this so much, you can't understand, but especially when we will get to the world building, so I will wait until we talk about that. I'll just say that this is what Broken Earth could have been. So yeah.
Okay.
I have to say that this felt so grounded. It was like too grounded. Like there was nothing. Like I was hooked into the story kind of like at the beginning really. Then it kind of lost me and it kind of got me like in parts. But I wasn't like super excited to explore something. And the main reason I guess was because there are so many things and they didn't tell me enough about any of them. So it was I already said that. But when I was reading the Broken Earth, even though there were parts I really hated. And there were parts I thought were really bad, and we agreed there were parts that really dragged. The parts that dragged were so short, and the parts that we hated were over quickly and were memorable to hate on and funny to hate on. And the concepts were so fresh and interesting that I enjoyed it so much more. Like the whole Broken Earth trilogy is probably a worse thing, and I'm 100% sure it's worse if you take into account all this Cosmere verse stuff. But it takes so much work. And the Broken Earth was so much easier to read.
Like, that's true, but that's because the Broken Earth trilogy is such a lazy work. And again, No, I think that was planned. It's just
so we would say that's
it's like an architect who doesn't want to do this. Like, it's an Italian architect who's corrupt and doesn't want to do their job properly.
And the corruption is very enjoyable to look at. Like, I think I had so much fun with the Broken Earth.
Yeah, exactly.
So like, fuck it. It doesn't.
That's a very good
fall
description.
Apart. It works.
And this works perfectly, and it's all constructed to go well together. But I almost feel like it's for old people. Like it's too much. It's too well prepared, and it takes too much time. And just get on with it and all this. So it's like perfect, but I'm bored by its perfection. Like just like. So yes, I want to read the second book, and yes, I enjoy this. But also, there are so many things that are so tiring for me. Like, I can't.
You will change your mind yet. Yes. Good. You will join us in the dark chambers of the Stormlight Archives. Well,
But I think the second book is much easier, if that helps.
it's overwhelming.
And I'm sure,
like,
because
just-
now they set up all this bullshit I didn't like, so now it's gonna do something. And if this wasn't, if the first book was just half of it, and then they got into the stuff that's gonna be the second book, I would be so happy about any of this, all of this.
I agree with you, because like on the second read of this book, there actually were so many moments that I thought, oh, I completely missed this the first time I read this. And there's just so many information that they throw at you that it actually, you really need to focus in order to get all the information from it. But the nice thing is that you don't need all the information from it. It kind of like gets you back into the story where you need
The
to
book
be.
is so long that I started forgetting it before I finished it. Like when I was rereading the chapter summaries, I was like reminding me of stuff that felt like it was a book that I read some time ago.
I had to read the first chapter, like the prologue, like 3 times.
So you're kind of like undecided, you would say, on if you
Like I
this
said,
or
I
not.
like it, but you have to be willing to sink a lot of time into this.
That's true.
That's my judgment. I recommend this to people who have enough time and are comforted by history and want to be engulfed in a super universe of interesting tidbits and details with a very grounded and realistic characters.
I wouldn't say history. I would say lore.
No, I would say it's kind of like the MMO of books. Have you ever played MMOs?
Yeah, I hate those.
Yeah, exactly. Like MMOs are like those things where like you start playing them and it's like, wow, this is the best thing ever. I don't want to do anything else in my life. And then you start realizing, oh wow, I played this for like 2,000 hours and I never see my friends again. And I've stopped going to university and this is not good.
So is this how you feel now, Paolo?
Yeah. Like I banished myself from playing MMOs. But I still think like many MMOs are amazing games and they can be the best games you can possibly play. It's just that I recommend them only to people who have an incredible amount of free time.
Exactly. If you're willing to invest all the time, which the audiobook for this was like 60 hours.
I think 48 or something like. It's not that long.
Okay, 50 hours, about 50 hours, which is a feat. Like, listen to 50 hours. Oh my god. So, quick addition. We have a few questions I have to clear up before we move on, because that's important if you wanted to decide. For me, it would be important if I wanted to decide if I'm reading this. And that's the second book and the third book. You've already read all of those.
Well, I'm about to finish the third one.
Yeah.
So, is it faster, is the question, than the first book?
The second book is definitely faster.
I think so. Yeah, but it's more full of interesting things and less of the setup that was in the first book.
Better for you?
Yes, for me, yes.
I think the second book is not necessarily better, but it is much, much faster. Like, I read the second book. Probably it was the fastest read I've ever done.
That's good news.
Yeah.
But the third book, is it also fast?
The third book, I would say it was a slow start, and I haven't finished it yet, but I think it has a slow end, but the central part is pretty fast.
Okay. So another thing I wanted to quickly mention was the audio versions, because I listened to most of it because I didn't have time, so I listened to it on the way to work. And we found with Martina 2 versions.
Oh yeah, there is the Way of Kings, the proper book, and then there's the Way of Kings Prime, right?
No, I meant the audio version.
Oh, this one.
This one too. So that's the Prime version that he
Yes.
released like 10 years later. It's the unedited, rough version of the story. And it's even longer.
No, it's essentially like a first draft of the story that Brandon completely scrapped and then wrote the book again after 4 years of writing different things. And now, in the recent years, I don't know if it was 1 year ago, he released it to the public.
For free.
For free, yes.
Which means many people will accidentally read it instead of the correct one.
Yes, it's kind of misleading that he called it the same thing, just Prime at the end. And
so don't read that.
Don't read that. It's a different...
I think it was intentional that they named it that way so that people would be more interested. But at the same time, I understand, it is confusing.
I started reading that first and I was like, what is
remember.
this?
Yeah.
So anyway, the audiobook has like a calm, professional voice-acted version on Audible.
Yes.
And then there is a movie-acted sound effects, music, all out super audio version.
I was really surprised about that as well. But how was it called? Is it like graphic audio or something like that?
I'm sure. But you can find it online, and it's not the version on Audible. It's like a special version.
Okay.
And it's super well acted. It's like each character has a special voice actor. There's like background fight music. It's epic. It's like fight. It's like a movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was so much fun. So I really recommend this version if you're listening.
I really wouldn't want to edit this because
it was so edited.
There was so many things happening all at once in that book, and I think for me it can become quite jarring because like you just like you want to hear the story, but instead you're hearing like epic music and fight and like nothing about like you hear what is being told, but it's like kind of lost in all of the chaos around. So it depends on what you like.
I'd even recommend your favorite chapter. Like re-listen to it. It's like a movie almost. So I'll put a clip here.
48-hour-long movie.
I'll put a clip here to compare like the normal version.
Since that day, Ashlin had simply been known as the traitor, and he was very, very dead. No! Elhokar said, falling to his knees on the bloodied ground, bowing his head.
And the super action version. Just to see.
Okay.
The pain was hot. So hot that the blood squirting out on his leg felt cold by comparison. The soldier yanked the weapon free. Sen stumbled backward, dropping his spear and shield. He fell to...
Alright, so to conclude the first part where we said basically nothing about this book, I'd like to give you something about this book which Martin prepared. Like he does. Prepared too much for this episode.
Yeah.
And wrote, it's not an essay, it's like a...
It's just a hook for the story, I guess.
So Martin wrote a hook, and it's...
it's not good, it's just like... It's just what you would probably find at the back of the book cover.
I mean, I think it's pretty good.
It's pretty good,
It's very well written. I think it's very
good.
Interesting. I would definitely read the book if I heard that. So you shouldn't undersell
So
it.
the final thing, before spoilers, to get you interested, we're gonna each read a description that Martin wrote about the 3 big timelines or storylines or character lines in the book. And we discovered wonders of modern... not technology, but being in the same place.
I guess very old technology. The oldest technology in the world.
We can share our notes physically.
So we can actually pass the notes to each other.
Well, I can start with the introduction to the story, because essentially what it is, it's like a story setup and then each character.
Okay.
Right? Because there are 3 characters, so I can start with the setup.
Okay.
In a world of knights with swords that cut through the very souls of men and magic long lost, where storms are powerful for both destruction and technology, where thoughts come to life and most animals are some sort of crap.
That's not crab, it's crab.
Yeah, form of crab, B at the end, lies a kingdom in which war is a nobleman's sport. Men listen to audiobooks, and women write all of the known history. There live our 3 main characters of the first of this 10-book saga. 10 books.
It's the holy number, isn't it?
So I can read Kaladin, and then you can read the other.
I think Kaladin is like the main character, I think, of this book.
Yes,
in the first
of
book,
the first book, yes. So Kaladin, a low-born surgeon's son, always dreaming of becoming a soldier, until one day his dream comes true, thrusting him into a world of treachery and suffering, where honor is found in places least expected. Cursed by survival and plagued by his conscience, he needs to protect his comrades from certain death against impossible odds. And that's Kaladin. So if you want Shallan.
So Shallan is another big character storyline, but I think it's the smallest.
In the first book.
In the first book. We're talking about the first book.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So Shallan, a young noble woman kept in seclusion as a treasure under lock and key, embarking on an adventure to save her family from ruin. With a dark secret close at hand, she seeks scholarship under one of the most influential women in the world. only to discover truths about herself and the dark history of mankind, leading her to be a person over dreams and imagination.
I mean, it sounds very well written. It sounds like a professional back of the book cover. So the last part is about Dalinar, who is like a noble knight, like the high class level of this story.
It's all written there. Just
sorry. Dalinar, a noble general and a soldier at heart, forced into politics by ideals long forgotten, driven by his brother's dying wish and visions of the past that threaten the future. He is standing firm against the flow of doubt and hostility as he aims to bring order to a kingdom where everyone plays their own game. And then, epic trailer voice. Join us on adventure. Join us on this epic adventure as we discover the world of Roshar.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you for reading this.
So thank you for writing this. It's awesome. Yeah. So that's the first part. If you got intrigued, please read this. In the second part, we're gonna get into just concepts, no stories. So it's still no spoilers, but it's kind of spoilers if you like the exploration world building, not bodybuilding.
Body of the world. If you want the body of the world, listen to episode 2.
Okay. Thanks for listening. Join us on weekly episodes on the Month of Stormlight Archive podcast. Rate us on Apple Podcasts and Audible, and see you in the next one.